For decades, the lives of millions of foreign workers in Saudi Arabia were dictated by a sponsorship system called Kafala. But now, in a really massive move, the kingdom has completely overhauled this 70-year-old framework. So, what do these changes actually mean for the people on the ground? Let's get into it.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at what the Kafala system actually was. Then we'll walk through the huge new reforms. After that, we'll dig into the real-world impact. The new freedoms, but also the challenges that are still there. And finally, we'll look at what this all means for the road ahead.
All right, let's start at the beginning, because to really get why these reforms are such a big deal, you first have to understand the system they're trying to fix. So what exactly was Kafala?
Okay, at its core, the Kafala system was a legal framework that literally tied a migrant worker's entire immigration status to their employer, who was known as a kafil or sponsor. This meant your boss, not the government, held the keys to your legal right to live and work in the country. And you can probably guess what that led to. It created this huge, profound power imbalance. For years, human rights groups slammed the system, arguing that it created the perfect conditions for exploitation because workers were almost completely dependent on the goodwill of their employer.
And here's how that control really played out in everyday life. Your employer could stop you from changing jobs, even if you got a way better offer. They held your exit permit, which means they could literally decide whether or not you could go home to visit your family. And if a worker just left a bad situation, the employer could file what's called an absconding charge, which could lead to arrest and deportation.
Which brings us to the reforms. In March 2021, Saudi Arabia rolled out its Labor Reform Initiative, a plan designed to fundamentally flip this dynamic on its head.
And the scale of this thing is just staggering. We are talking about roughly 13 million foreign workers. To put that in perspective, that's about 42% of the entire population of the country. So yeah, the impact of these changes is absolutely massive.
Now this gets to the heart of it all, the two biggest, most game-changing freedoms for foreign workers. Before, you needed your employer's permission for pretty much everything. Now, workers can actually change jobs without their boss's consent after their contract is up or after their first year. And crucially, they can apply to travel outside the country on their own. That's a fundamental right just handed back to them.
So how does all this actually work in practice? Well, the government basically took the power away from individual employers and moved it onto digital platforms. Now, all employment contracts have to be logged online on a portal called Qiwa. If you want to transfer jobs, it happens through that platform. And if you need an exit visa, you can request it yourself on another app called Absher. It's a shift to a state-supervised digital world.
Okay, so the new rules look great on paper, but what's the actual experience been for workers on the ground? Let's take a look at the real benefits, but also some of the challenges that are popping up.
I mean, the potential upsides here are huge. Workers have much more freedom to find better jobs. They have the basic human right to travel. They have more transparency thanks to digital contracts. And all of this together gives them more bargaining power to push for better pay and better working conditions. It's about giving people more control over their own lives.
But some experts are saying, let's not get ahead of ourselves. This quote here suggests that while one type of employer control might be gone, the power dynamic hasn't totally vanished. It's just shifted. And you can see what they mean when you look closer at job mobility. Check out this table comparing the rules across the Gulf. In Saudi Arabia, the freedom to switch jobs isn't unconditional. It usually only kicks in after your first year of service. Now, that's a huge step up, for sure, but it's still a freedom with strings attached. And this has created what some are calling a new loophole. Apparently, some employers, if they find out a worker is trying to leave for another job, will retaliate by issuing a final exit visa. This basically punishes the worker for using their new rights and forces them out of the country. As one worker said, exit visas are the new absconding reports.
So let's zoom out. How does all of this fit into the bigger picture? To really get it, we need to understand why Saudi Arabia is making these changes right now and what that tells us about the future.
To get the why, you just have to look at the numbers. This chart shows how essential migrant labor is to Gulf economies. We're talking over half the population in some places. This isn't just temporary help, it's a permanent, critical part of the economic engine. And that makes having a stable, modern labor market an absolute top priority.
The main driver here is Saudi Arabia's huge national plan, Vision 2030. The whole point is to move the economy away from its reliance on oil. To do that, the kingdom has to create a job market that's competitive and attractive enough to pull in and keep top-tier foreign talent.
The old Kafala system was a massive roadblock to that goal.
And there are some early signs that these changes are working. According to the Saudi government, labor disputes involving foreign workers have dropped by a whopping 50% since the reform started. That suggests a lot less friction in the labor market, which is a really good sign.
And all of this leads us to the big, final question. There is no doubt these reforms have given millions of workers new freedoms and more dignity. But with new loopholes and challenges still being worked out, are we actually watching the end of the Kafala system, or are we just seeing it evolve into something new? The answer to that is going to shape the future of the entire region.